I ran across something really interesting this morning, actually preparing for the podcast today. And listen to this: FIFA is launching a feasibility study to address a World Cup every 2 years rather than every 4 years, according to the BBC. So this is really, really interesting. So apparently, at FIFA's annual conference or congress, I guess you could say, the Saudi Arabian Football Association, I believe their SAFA, proposed a document, a proposal. So I'm trying to remember the right term for it, where they would look into perhaps doing a study where they would see, would it make sense for FIFA to host a men's and women's World Cup every 2 years rather than four. And this got a pretty hefty favorable vote. 166, according to the article, 166 national federations voted in favor of conducting the study, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm interpreting the article correctly, that is. While only 22 national federations voted against the proposal. So I want to be clear here before everybody runs screaming saying that the World Cup is officially only going to be every 2 years. Now stop. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, and like I said, if I'm interpreting this article from the BBC correctly, it sounds like FIFA is going to be looking into do a World Cup for both the men's and women's side every 2 years. So for me, this is absolutely fascinating to think about. It's like because of the fact that FIFA's done a World Cup every 4 years since basically its inception, but this is just a proposal. If, like I said, I want to be super clear. This is just if I'm interpreting this right, I think this is just a proposal to look into doing it. It's not anything official yet, but hypothetically speaking, if this did happen, if FIFA went with a World Cup for both the men's and women's side every 2 years, how would this shape up? So, me, I'm going to put in some of my personal bias here. For me personally, I'm all for it if they did a World Cup every 2 years for many, many reasons. One, I absolutely love the World Cup. It's one of my favorite competitions and sporting events in the world. And from a U.S. Women's national team's perspective, it's one of the most exciting times to be a fan for a few reasons. One, we all come together, we all watch the games. Everyone's really hyped, everyone's really excited for it. And that's just what fandoms do, right? And with the U.S. Women's national team being the most successful women's team in the world, it builds up the hype even more. So it's a really exciting time to be a fan overall. And even for those who aren't diehard U.S. Women's national team fans, I know a lot of people who are not women's national team fans who watch the Women's World Cup because the U.S. is so good. And in doing so and having this World Cup more often, you get more opportunities to create a larger fan base. When people hear the World Cup, ears perk up and people watch. Even people who don't even I know people who don't even like soccer who love watching the World Cup. I mean, of course, this is just speaking in my little small microcosm of life. There's a great big wide world out there, which is why they're conducting a study on this and not just asking me about it. But in doing every 2 years, it just draws more attention and more exposure to the women's game that it wouldn't have otherwise, and even the men's game as well. Especially for the women's game because of the fact that not everybody has access cable wise to watch the NWSL, the FAWSL, or Division One Feminine. It's getting better in terms of access in that respect, but like I said, not too many people are very big fans of the women's game in terms of club football from what I've seen yet. It's like a lot of the people that I talk to are mainly national team supporters across the board. Like I said, that's just in my small microcosm, but that's just what I'm observing and why I'm forming this opinion that I'm forming. And I think it brings even more benefits to the women's soccer national teams across the world because it would force them to meet more often. If you guys watch some of the friendlies way back in the She Believes Cup, like when Argentina was playing, or even I believe Colombia, I think Ali Wagner mentioned that Argentina, like they when they played the U.S., it was like the first time they had met in like 18 months. That's insane. Like for a national team to not meet for 18 months, I know pandemic pending, of course, but for a national team not to meet that long, for to not meet for that long, it, to me is a little jarring. And if you have a World Cup every 2 years, you create more qualifiers, you create less just friendlies, you create more qualifiers, and inevitably leads to more games and more excuses and more opportunities for these national teams to meet up and get better and grow. So I think it'd be in the best interest of the women's game in order to do this sort of format. So that's another food for thought overall too. And another thing that I want to say is in terms of league play, I don't think this will impact league play a whole lot for a couple reasons. Barring the NWSL, this wouldn't apply to the NWSL this particular point, but there are already international breaks regularly throughout seasons for the FAWSL Division One Feminine, the Australian W League, what have you, where actually maybe the caveat to that would be the Australian W League, but you get my point. There's international breaks regularly for a lot of these teams, and instead of just having friendlies, why not have more World Cup qualifiers? Why not have more qualifiers going on and whatnot, and get games to be more entertaining and draw more people into watching the international break games? So just some more food for thought on that respect. Overall, I'm all for the World Cup because football's fun. Why not draw more people to it? Why not create more opportunity to grow the fan base and get the fandom involved? So, but despite my opinions, of course, there are other larger things that I have to be realistic about as a fan in order to look at it from a different lens. And it's this essentially, we have to look at all the other major tournaments that are impacted, that would be impacted by this move. For example, the Olympics. How would the Olympics be impacted by this move? How would the European Championship be impacted by this move? The Euros is usually done, if I'm not mistaken, every 4 years, also including Olympics. So it's like there's a competition every however many years. I'm starting to lose track because there's so many competitions. But how would these be impacted? Because if you've got the World Cup going on every other year, where does that leave room for these other competitions? Do they get eradicated? Um do they fight back? Like what kind of heads will butt in this particular case? So I'm really curious to see what the impacts on those would be, especially if you love those tournaments. I love any football tournament, so that's just something to keep in mind as well. And the implications on the NWSL, and now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, the Australian W League would probably be pretty hefty because both of those leagues. Hang on, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Scratch the Australian W League in this point. So just for the NWSL might be affected pretty hefty because if the World Cup is going on every 2 years, that means the NWSL has like a whole month or two roadblock in their schedule where they're going to be missing probably some of the best talent in the world, and that's going to draw attention away from the league overall. So this particular move, if they did go through with it, would probably hurt the NWSL, I would say, overall. However, one thing I do want to say, if a lot of players from the NWSL are playing in the World Cup every other year, it gives a lot more younger players, a lot of players fresh to the league who might not be playing in the World Cup, more chances to shine, more chances to get better, more chances to grow. Thus, again, upping the level of competition in the world of WOSO in general. So there's some good and bad for the NWSL to be had there. Not sure what that exactly would be, but those are just my general thoughts on it too. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this proposal to me was pretty surprising. Like I said, it's just a proposal. Nothing's written in stone yet, so don't go running off saying that, oh my God, FIFA's going to do a World Cup every other year. Not what I'm saying. Just saying that it's on their mind. So, what do you guys make of this situation? Jump down in the comments below and let me know what you think.